time that stuff starts to come in, me and Kelly grab hands and we go, no, we're going right to the source. We're going to go be with him every time. That doesn't matter where we're at. That's the incredible thing. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter if you're in northern India and ISIS guys walk in, right? And maybe your dad or your grandpa is the one that they single out for that. And you're thinking, oh no, I'm not going to get a hug ever again from my dad. Well, God the Father just steps in and says, no, you definitely are. You definitely are. Right? There's all kinds of stuff that's happened to me the last 3 weeks that I could go on and on about. You know, it's the type of stuff that he's been talking about my entire life. Things that I can't explain. But I know. Because I'm always spending time with him. And now I can't do anything but that. Can't do anything but go back to him again and again and again, especially when I start to worry. You know, there's a foundational principle in the kingdom, and it might be the foundation. And that's intimacy with our Father. It says, Jesus said, love God, right? Love God with everything in you. Your heart, mind, soul, all your strength. That's like the number one for him, for Jesus. And if Jesus is telling us to do that, and he says, this is the first thing that you have to get lined up, then that must be pretty important. That must be the start and the continuation, and everything that we're supposed to do feeds off of that. He wants that from us. That just amazes me, because especially with all the stuff that I've done and been before now, you know, and so many of my friends and so many people that I've met, that just changes them as soon as they know him. They don't have to know everything about him. You know, the people in the early church, they might have had one letter from Paul. They might have had one letter from John. Yet they could go and they could know the Father right then, and then they could actually love themselves, right? To love another person as yourself, how can you do that if you don't know first how to love yourself? And the only way to do that is to be intimate with the Father. You know, that word has so many connotations today, so many things that it can mean, you know, intimacy. Often people are saying, you know, that's sex. Were you intimate with your wife? You know, in counseling, that's something we ask. You know, how's that going? That's not it. God's view of sex, you know, is properly viewed. It's a byproduct of intimacy. It is something that intensifies intimacy between a man and a wife. Intensifies the intimacy. That is not the intimacy. The intimacy is what my grandpa was talking about a little bit ago. It's relationship. It's that constant joy. And that should be going on all the time. You know, we talk about, you know, a lot of guys are like, well, you know, how do I get my wife to open up? It's all week long, all the time. All the time. Letting her know, reminding her that you're all about her. That you're only interested in her. Well, guess what? God is constantly wanting to cultivate that intimacy with you. But only if you'll let him. You know, you might say, well, that's pretty brave to talk about sex in church, Pastor Carl. You're 4 weeks in, you start talking about the crazy stuff, you know? You're not even supposed to say that. I say it's necessary and it's far overdue. Why is that? Because when it's broken, when it's used wrongly, it becomes the worst thing in the world. It breaks people. Because it's supposed to be something that's holy. It's supposed to be something that bonds people together in such a way that they can't ever be broken apart again. But guess what happens? That reed shaker out there, that slewfoot, he gets in there and he starts warping that. And he especially gets into powerful men. He gets into men, he gets into women too. One in 4 women. This is just in the United States. These are just estimates, right? Most people, just like I was saying earlier, they don't want to talk about sex, right? So if you come and ask them, have you been abused? They don't want to talk about that. But 1 in 4 women have reported it. So if we look at 8 billion people and we say half of those people are women, that's 4 billion. 1 billion people permanently marred because that thing's been warped. It's been used for evil against them. What's something that should be really, really good? Something that should make their life wonderful has come and broken them. Men are often forgotten within that. So 1 in 6 men, right? They're less likely to say something. I don't think I would. Maybe now, but not when I was younger. I had 3 men come to me this week. This week. Not people in counseling, people that I've talked to. A couple of them are my friends, and they haven't ever told me about this before, but this week, for some reason, they did. And in my human mind, I say, I don't know how that happened, but on that plane that he was talking about earlier, that heaven plane, all of a sudden you know why. Because we need to talk about it. 2 of those men were abused by women at a young age, and he said that it disrupted them for the rest of their life, caused that breaking of breaking of innocence, messed them up for the rest of their life because now that's all they can think about. They don't know how to handle it. They didn't know how to handle it. And so it caused a lot of problems for them all the way down the line. Why? Why does that happen? Right now, people want to say, well, there's really no evil. There's no objective good or evil. Yeah, right. Marty and Gareth, you know all about that with the kids that you help. You know there's evil. We know that. So if there is evil, then there has to be something so much better. Something that's way better than that, because there has to be a good. There has to be an ultimate good that overcomes that. We know it. Because we see people come out of those situations. We see people that have been abused, that the world says, you should be a victim for the rest of your life. And they say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to be a victim for the rest of my life. And that's what he doesn't want. The God upstairs, the one who created you, does not want you to be a victim. Nearly 90% of our behavior is going to be formed by the time that we're 5. There's various estimates. That's a hard thing to bottle. But, let's say that 90% of your behavior is formed by the time you're 5. And then it just kind of peters out from there until you get to 18, 19, somewhere in there. That's why we have that as the adult age. It's different for everyone. But by that time, it's nearly 100%. And barring a significant emotional event, that behavior is not going to change. You know what I hear when I hear significant emotional event? An encounter with Jesus Christ. Because that's what changed me. That was a pretty significant emotional event in my life. And especially when you feel that Holy Spirit empowerment, when things start to really change. I knew Jesus from a young age. It was emotional then. But there was times where God just said, boom, I'm breaking in. And it blew my world apart in the best way possible. In the Bible, it gives us a good idea of what that might look like in Acts 9, very beginning, 1 through 6. It says, "Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples." Paul wrote a good chunk of the New Testament, and he was breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He was ISIS. He went to the high priest and he asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, and guess what, probably children too, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed round about him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, who you are persecuting," he replied. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." Sounds like Paul experiencing a significant emotional event, and that changed his behavior. He was pretty tied to the law. He was this Pharisee of Pharisees, he said, but he was ISIS. He was evil. And all of a sudden, he was different. Without that encounter, honestly, all of us are subject to becoming that. Each one of us can be that person. Often that's something we don't want to look at. We don't want to look back and say, what could I have been? And that's probably not good most of the time. But every once in a while, we should look back and we should say, yeah, what was I really like? Try to get your mind back to that place. Because I know what I was like. I was not good. And I was opening myself up to more and more evil, more and more things where I could have really, really harmed somebody. And I know there's times where he stayed my hand when he didn't have to. And that could have been one of those ones that maybe has marred somebody. And I thank God that he's forgiven me. At least I'm not as bad as so-and-so, right? You fool. You fool. Everything that you do that breaks intimacy with God puts you right in that position. That opens you up to that. That opens you up to that. You hear a soul up there that knows exactly what that feels like. Bible, it says, "But I tell you, anyone who looks on a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Anything that you do in your mind, God says you've done in your heart. That's a high calling. But if you don't have that pride and you're willing to say, you know what, God, take that from me. Take that. Every time that thought pumps into your mind, you know where it's coming from. That crosses your plane of consciousness. We really don't know where thoughts come from in terms of the physical, in terms of psychology. We don't know what that is. We don't know where that comes from. But we know. Out of the heart, your mouth speaks. So those thoughts that come across the plane of your mind, they can be from the devil, they can be from you, they can be from God. Anything that's telling you to harm somebody else is not from God. Anything that's telling you to use sex in a way that is not between a man and a woman that is married is not from God. And especially anything that tells you to harm somebody who's vulnerable is not from God. He is not that way. Don't give anyone a pass for sin. If there's somebody you know that is doing those things, it's okay to call them out. Now, that doesn't mean that you judge them. It doesn't mean that you say that I'm better. It means you say that God doesn't want you to do that. And you better have some force behind it, because that's what He demands. We will not allow any of that to happen here. And God won't allow it. This week I gave our staff a verse. 1 Peter 5:8, be alert and a sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around you like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. I tell you what, he would very much like to devour you and each member of your family. He'd like to keep them wrapped up in sexual sins. He'd like to keep fathers, wrapped up with the TV and even just checking out Shakira shaking it at the Super Bowl. He'd like that because at least then he's just got you where you can't be used by God because there's stuff in between you and him. Right? I know when I'm not lined up. I know when I haven't been intimate with God, and I crave it now. I crave it in a way that I cannot even express to you. I just crave it that much because there's so much peace there. I don't have any fear. I have zero anxiety. And that used to be a major part of it for me, a major part of life, just worrying about what's going on. Even just worrying what's going on with my kids. I can't be 5 places at once. They're everywhere. I mean, you see them, and I don't want to stress about that. I don't want to stress about somebody harming them. That is so hard, especially with everything that's available today. We hear about, perverted people trying to reach them through Minecraft and Roblox. It's supposed to be fun games for kids, but because of the tools that are out there, the internet, right, that evil can get to them. Well, I tell you what, the best place for you to be is on your knees. If you're a dad, the best place for you to be is on your knees, praying hard. Not fearful, but just saying, God, I know that you have my kids protected. I know that you're not going to let them get hurt because of who you are. You're the powerful one. You're everywhere. You can connect to any heart. And anybody that's trying to get to them, all of a sudden you're going to reach out and touch them. Say, nope, not today. Not today. Another thing that happens is so often that sin is preceded by a lowering of our inhibitions, right? Drugs, alcohol, putting yourself in a position where your mind is open and your soul is open to things that it shouldn't be open to, that you wouldn't be open to otherwise. There's a lot of different things like that can just slide you just enough out of the way where you're no longer intimate with God because you're choosing this thing. But especially drugs or alcohol or anything that distorts our ability to understand God, to think and reason. He wants that. That's what the devil wants. He wants to interrupt that communication with you and God. And it's just like, things that come between you and your spouse. The devil's constantly trying to put stress on you, put things in there that comes between you. Right? You have to actively cultivate it. It's just like weeds in a garden. We're going to have spring here pretty soon. We're going to have a garden out here. Okay? That takes constantly being in it. You need to constantly be cultivating intimacy with the Father, this relationship, and then it'll be that much easier with this relationship, with the man to wife, wife to husband. So what does that look like? What does true intimacy look like? One of the best guys in the Bible for that is David. Man, he just understood it in a way. His heart was towards him. That's why Jesus came from that lineage. He said, okay, this guy gets it. He understands. And boy, David did a lot of bad stuff. He committed this marring. He was part of that with Bathsheba. She didn't want that. But he's the king. Who are you going to say? Who are you going to cry out to stop that? No. But guess what? They still overcame that. And still God said, I'm going to use your lineage even besides that, even though you did that, because you're repentant. Right? He took David's son. He said, your son's going to die because of what you did. But David still didn't even let that situation say, no, all right, I quit, God. You're too mean. You're too awful. He knew. And he knew he'd see his son again. Say, all right, God, I know you got to take him. You know, he pleaded with God. He didn't give up. He pled with him till the very end, and when they said it's done, that's when he took those grave clothes off. That's when he took the sackcloth and ashes off. Because he said, well, what's the point now? You know, there's no more mourning for him. He's gone. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure that never happens again. So we go to Psalm 139. Turn there if you got your Bibles. It's good to read this along together. Starting in verse 1, you've searched me, Lord, and you know me. To know someone, we have to have intimate knowledge with them, especially in the Old Testament. That's what that know means. We'll see this word know throughout the psalm. Every single person has a desire to be known and to deeply know somebody else. But only God can search us and really know us. He says, you know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. Wow. Just like we were talking about. He knows where those thoughts come from. He knows what's of you. He knows what's of the devil. And he knows what he's sending to you. Are you listening for him? And all those things that you yearn to express, you know, especially young people, sometimes they don't even know what's going on inside of them and they just want it to come out. They want somebody else to understand what's going on with them. Well, he does. And he wants that with you, especially if you're in that age group. Don't worry about that. Just express your heart to him. And sometimes you may not know what you want to say, but just start speaking out to him. It says, you discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all my ways. I love that. I love that because I know each of my kids' ways. I know that Brooke is soft and demure. She's our oldest. But she also just has a fierceness about her. She has a courage inside of her. She jumped up. We were hiking the other day with my buddy John, and she climbed up to the top of this rock. She hasn't been doing stuff like that before, but I see the courage growing inside of her. You know, Mom was probably freaking out. She didn't want her to, oh, Carl, should she get down? I said, no, she's just fine. I saw how, quickly she climbed it. She wasn't worried. I know that Briana is extremely fun. She was the one coming up here. There's nothing between me and her. She is wide open. She just loves it. She wants to cuddle all the time. Right? But I can't speak harshly to her. It doesn't work. It doesn't get her to do anything. Now I can motivate her. I say, come on, baby, you can do better than that. And she will. Brittany, man, she's just fierce. She's strong, really strong. She's loyal. Braylon, man, if you've seen me chasing him around, I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't drive you crazy, but he's way faster than me and 10 steps ahead of me. But he's got the biggest heart. He was yelling to his mom the other day downstairs, I love you, Mom! Just as loud as he could, and just said it like 8 times in a row. I was like, well, what else do you want, Kel? The boy loves you. And then Branch, it's fun to see his personality coming out. He's easygoing. He's, he just laughs. He has a good time. And every single one of you know your kids that way. If you're a good dad, you're a good mom. You know your kids that way. And even the ones that you can't see your kids, maybe you wish you could. Maybe they're not here anymore. But you knew them, and you know them. And maybe they're graduated or wherever they're at, you know them. And God knows you. He knows you. He's watching you. So before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely. He knows what you're going to say. He knows what your heart is speaking. You hem me in up behind and before me. You lay your hand upon me. Brooke asked me the other day, she said, how do I know that he's real? Dad, I know that he's real, but how do I know? I was like, wow, what a question from a 10-year-old. I He said, you know when I come up behind you and give you a hug when you're not expecting it and you kind of have those tingles? I was like, it's a lot like that. That's how it is for me. It might be different for you. But there's ways that he lets you know. There's ways he lets you know. He says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty to attain. How could God be watching me? How could he want that with me? Why does he want to give me a hug? Why does he want to hold me? I've wondered that a lot of times. Why? Why do you want that? Because he loves you. He wants you to be more you than you've ever been. And when he touches you in that way, when he holds you like that, all of a sudden everything inside of you that he put in there starts waking up and he starts growing it out of you. That garden is cultivating with him and all those good gifts that he put in you. They're different than anybody else's. Nobody can be and give what you have. But the only way that that works out is when you're lined up with him, when you're cultivating, when you're back and forth with him, the master gardener. God, pull it out of me. Get all those weeds out of there. I just want to grow good stuff for you. I want to produce good fruit. I don't want to be burned up. I don't want to be thrown out. Because that's what he warns. He said, if you don't produce good fruit, I can't use you. And the only thing that that's good for is to be thrown in the fire. Man, that sounds pretty rough. But if you're going around marring other people and destroying their fruit, how can he do anything else? When my kids are doing something wrong or they're hurting each other, how can I not stop them? And sometimes that's forcefully. Because it's necessary. That doesn't make him bad, that makes him good. That makes him just. So where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? He's everywhere. He's that connection whenever you want it. You know, I saw this beautiful quote. I always used to be scared of like eternity or scared of that deep connection with God. Like, oh man, you know, he's the God of the universe and forever. What does that look like? I tell you what, when I'm having fun with my kids, I'm not even aware that time is passing. Like when it's really fun and I'm just holding my wife, you know, we're just cuddling at the end of the day. I don't know how much time that is. I'm not looking at the clock. I'm not looking at my phone, wondering when it's going to end. Because I don't want it to end. I would rather stay there forever. And this guy named Dr. William Barclay, he wrote a really good synopsis of that. He says in Greek it's aeonis, or aeonias, and it doesn't have so much to do with the duration of life, but the quality of life. It's not the amount of time, it's how much quality is in that time. And when you're with God, it is the quality. It's the best. And that can only be applied to him. That eternal life, therefore, is nothing other than the life of God. Life with God, inside of God. Being his bride forever. Being held by him forever. And he's so creative. He just brings things out over and over again. Just new things, things that you've never seen. You're not going to be bored. You're going to be so invested and so excited about everything going on, you won't even be aware that time is passing. If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you're there. So many ache for somebody to pursue them. Kelly and I met with a single mom and her kids, and she's just aching for some man to really pursue her. And not in a forceful way, but in a soft way, in a way that just continually reminds her that, yeah, you are what I want. And I want to do it the right way. If If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. Boy, when you're in that with him, nothing can take you out but you. Nothing can take you out but you. Nothing can take you out of his hand. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. You know, that sounds to me like sometimes we go and hide. We go and hide in the dark because that light's too great and we know that we're sinful. Like my grandpa was saying, we're still human. And that's the hardest part, is I know that at some point in my life, I'm likely going to mess up again. I'm going to do things that separate me from that intimacy. But he said, I don't care where you are. I don't care if you go hide in the dark. I'm going to come find you. And I'm going to bring you back. Because I love you. And I'm going to love you the right way. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. There's the only intimacy that I can compare to husband and wife is what that produces. Life. A mother and child. That baby inside a mother's womb. How much more intimate can you be? And yet, again, the devil comes to disrupt that. He comes to tell the mama that that's a burden. Comes to tell her that it's too hard, that there's not enough money, that nobody cares about you, that nobody wants you, that nobody is going to help you, so you better just get rid of your baby. Kill that life in you. Kill it! That's what he says. That's what the evil one says. Because he wants to destroy, he wants to mar that mama for eternity. Guess what? God doesn't judge you. If you've had an abortion, God does not hate you. He loves you. He wants to heal that in you. He wants to change that. But only if you go to him. That's the only way, that's the only place that can happen. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. We know. We know that he's good. If you've experienced that, if you've been walking with him, if you feel that cultivated intimacy with him, you know how wonderful that is, and everything that he does is good. You know, he says, my frame is not hidden from you. When I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Wow, he's been thinking about you for a long time. You didn't just happen here by accident. He has a purpose for you. And no matter where you're at on that journey, no matter how long it's been, that opportunity is always available. You can always start cultivating that with him. You can restart cultivating that with him. That's wide open to you today. There's no reason that can't be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Well, that's a beautiful feeling. Me and my friend were laying out here. I know it's kind of wild, but we were laying out here one Saturday night a few weeks ago and just praying right here in the church. And we'd fall asleep for a little bit, fall asleep praying, fall asleep crying, I don't know. We were talking and just two good men trying to get it right, trying to just connect with God in the deepest way that we possibly could. And what a deal. And when you wake up, he's still right there. You know, I still felt it. I fell asleep and I wake up and he's still there. It's still intimate. If only, God, you would slay the wicked. Away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. That's that intensity in me. You know, when I'm talking about that, people being marred, women being convinced to do this heinous thing. Yeah, that does get me intense. And it gets God intense too. And it got David intense. I don't want wickedness anywhere around me. I don't want anything disrupting what me and God are doing. what He's doing through me. Whatever that weed is, I'm yanking it out. And if I see it in other people, I'm going to say it. Not because I'm somebody, but because He's somebody and He says, I don't want that in their life. Help them see it. And if you see anything in me, you tell me. Because I want to know. I don't get a pass. There's no problem with that. If you see something wrong in me, you tell me. Because I don't want any blind spots, and we all need each other for that. They speak of you, God, with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. People preaching in the name of Jesus and then going out and harming people. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them, and I count them my enemies because of the spirit in them. I don't hate anyone, but I hate evil spirits. I hate anything that's of the devil. I hate anything that comes between people and God. And I'm not going to let it stand if I can help it. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Whatever that anxiety is, whatever that thing in you that just keeps telling you that you can't get there with Him, you can't make it, tell it to take a hike. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. How beautiful is that? Lead me in the way everlasting forever, eternity. The way that lets you live with God that way for eternity, and everything else is stripped off. All that human stuff that you don't have to do anymore. You just get to be with Him, and you won't even realize that time's passing. It'll be true intimacy. Well, praise God. Pray with me, huh? Dear Lord, we don't want anything but You. We don't want anything in between us and You. You don't want anything between You and us. Lord, if there's somebody today that just wants that so badly, that wants that hug, and maybe their kids aren't here, and maybe they didn't have a good dad, or somebody hurt them, or their boyfriend, or their dad, or their husband hurt them, or maybe it's a man that way back when he was vulnerable, somebody really hurt him. That can go away. Lord, I just pray that out today. God, everything in us from our very beginning, just erase all that. Erase all that. Take it from them. They want intimacy with You, God. They want to be held by You. They want to feel You living and breathing in them as one. Lord, let it be.